Maramai. Well, usually on this day, or July the 5th, if we can manage it, we enjoy a theatrical spectacular here at St John's, below Tynwald Hill. A stage crammed with players. Perhaps Les Miserables is not apt, but maybe Showboat would sum it up. Yes, can't help loving that Isle of Man of mine. Yes, but not this year. It's minimalist theatre. More waiting for COVID than Les Not So Miserables, because we have come through what may be the first, maybe the last visitation. So a small cast has replaced the hundreds that are usually here. Are we downhearted? We'll come back to me on that one. Let's see how this goes. It is a beautiful sunny day, a breezy day, the wind coming from the northeast blowing on our backs. Very few people here because very few people are allowed here. But amongst the people who are here is my colleague, Donald Mercer, and I think he's got someone who's been very much involved in what's been happening in the last 2 months with him. Donald.
Good morning, everybody. Tynwald on your due. Happy Tynwald Day. I'm joined, Health and Social Care Minister David Ashford. Good morning. How are you? A Tynwald Day with a difference this year. You've experienced a few. This is going to look a bit different to previous years, I think it's safe to say.
Exceptionally different. I mean, distancing, we didn't even know if there'd be restrictions. So it's actually an absolutely, it's amazing that we're actually here today to being able to do what we are doing.
What changes have we seen? I mean, you've just been giving me the rundown on what will happen in terms of processing up to the hill and on the hill. What's it going to look like?
So there's not going to be any church service this year. We're also obviously no fare for the public. It's going to mean that we as members are going to go straight onto the hill. Then when we come off, there'll be no lining the processional route. It'll be straight into the church. And obviously the petitions for redress this year will be being presented to the governor, not by the petitioners themselves, but by the Clerk of Tynwald.
Slightly different roles for the Lieutenant Governor and for the
in terms of the Deemsters as well, the first Deemster the issue, but there'll be different for the ceremony there as well.
Has this been a strange year to be in, hasn't it?
It's certainly been an interesting year to be Minister of Health and Social Care. Concern have put us in an absolutely wonderful situation on Ireland, and we're back to pretty much normal.
What's your priority for the year ahead?
So obviously my priority in terms of health is getting the health service back to where it was, and then carrying on with healthcare transformation to ensure that we can actually move the health service forward.
Because a lot of things have been put on hold obviously through the pandemic, and the transformation being one of those. Are we going to see that accelerated now over the next year?
We most certainly are. The Manx Care and in the House of Keys, we've just done the second reading. We'll be moving to clauses in October. And we plan to have Manx Care live as start of April next year.
What changes are the Manx public going to see?
So the big change is the way services are delivered. So we will be looking to do services in a more rounded way. The type of services available as well will actually hopefully be expanded under Manx Care. But also the most important thing is there will be a full focus on service delivery by an independent organisation, and there'll be more quality control as well.
Speaking more broadly about government's objectives, what's happened to the programme for government? Things have been shelved, haven't they, really, for the past few months now?
Yeah, the programme for government now is starting to ramp up again as well. Obviously, we've lost a couple of months in terms of that, which we had to do. There was no way we could have continued with the programme for government alongside everything else. But that is now kicking in. Departments are going back through all the things that are in the programme for government, looking at deliverables and the timescales around that, and what is now practical given the length of time left for this administration.
7 months ago, we were talking about having a very busy legislative programme on the Isle of Man. Are there things which are going to be binned completely?
Well, I think it's a bit early to say there'll be things that will bin completely. I know that the new Minister for Policy and Reform, Mr Harmer, is working exceptionally hard to drive the legislative programme forward. I think it's a very ambitious programme we've got, and it will certainly be a busy year ahead legislative-wise.
Just finally, for you personally, are we going to see your name on the ballot paper again next year?
I haven't decided yet. I'm a strange politician. I decide about 6 months before an election. So if you ask me that question around about Easter next year, I'll give you an answer.
Gurumai Mora, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Cheers. And we'll just come over and speak to Enterprise Minister Lawrence Skelly. Moramai.
What am I to you too?
How are things? All right?
Yes, all good. Lovely sunny day here at St John's, so looking forward to it.
I caught a post of yours on LinkedIn this morning. You were, there was a picture of some flags being flown down south, a real national...
It is, but it's still our National Day, and I think we need to recognise first National Day, so we should celebrate it, and whether you're here on the Isle of Man or around the world, you know, there's Manxys all around the world, and hopefully some of them are listening and picking this up, and they'll be celebrating in their own way.
Have you heard from some constituents about what they're going to be doing to celebrate?
Not yet, but there will be certainly later, no doubt, getting down into the constituency and visiting people and saying hello, and hopefully everyone will have a great day.
With your enterprise hat on, it's going to be a busy few months in the fallout of the pandemic, about what you're going to do to try and revive the Manx economy, really. It's quite a defining moment of your political career, isn't it?
Well, it is, I think, for this administration, without a doubt, and of course we think back, it's not all that long ago we were talking about Brexit being a defining moment, and of course now COVID has come along and that's changed everything. So we got to where we have here with the help of the Manx public from a health point of view, and now the focus has to be on the my space, and particularly Treasury Minister's space too.
We heard from the Chamber of Commerce not that many weeks ago that around a quarter of the island businesses might not survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Tell us honestly, what's the health of the economy like at the minute?
Well, I think you need to wait till July, Tynwald, to pick that particular point up, as we'll have a budget statement from the Treasury Minister, and we'll be launching what will be the economic plans and stimulus there to keep our economy going forward. And we must recognise that whilst there's lots of businesses that have been impacted, there's quite a lot of businesses that did work right the way through. They adapted to this environment and helped support our economy throughout and continue to.
Have government support schemes gone far enough to help?
Well, we have had an independent review just recently by KPMG, and the feedback of that was actually very positive. Whilst we've made a number of changes and amendments, and what's great is the community, and you think of the business community and the Manx Solidarity Fund, which almost popped up out of nowhere, out of no time, and had a phenomenal fund. It's actually helped those who may not have got immediate support. So yes, it's great to see and great to get to this point, but a lot of work between now and next year.
We're going to see more big changes in the oncoming months as the... what do you see as being the priority for your department?
Well, obviously is these economic recovery plans to maintain and grow. What we've got to do here is work and adapt actually too, because they talk about this new normal, and part of that is how people are working normal today, and many people went to be mobile working, which I think sits very, very well with the climate change plan. Why? Because clearly you're not driving to work, and therefore you don't have that CO2 emission, but you also actually have a saving from that, and there is an opportunity there to spend in your local economy. You spend more time working from home, so that's an interesting one, because it's quite easy, isn't it? And that's what we did. Nearly lost the hat there for a minute. Quite breezy here at St John's, but yes, it is. So there are a number of things, but certainly trying to keep our economy going and continue where we left off, because it's interesting. We only a few short months ago we were talking about unemployment being at its lowest level, I think, in 15 years. Here we are a few months later, and unemployment is now at its highest level in 20 years. So
it's a big job for you, isn't it?
It's a huge job. So keeping people in work and keep businesses going is our ultimate aim.
Go remind more. Very much. We'll head up back nearer to the hill and hand to John Moss. John, how are things looking over there?
Well, they're looking beautiful. If you want to see what they look like, then I can offer you on Manx Radio's website beautiful pictures. We're looking at a picture now of the hill, and also on the Tynwald website as well. So when I'm doing my commentary, one of the problems I have is that I may be describing things that people can see on those two items, but on the radio they won't be seeing. So bear with me on the radio, please. So I'll have to sort of juggle between the two. Let me just walk out in front of our marquee here, small marquee, to tell you what I can actually see as far as the day is concerned. Not many people, of course, because of the restrictions. Manx Concert Brass opposite me. They are the band that's going to be used. I see my colleague James Davis over there. Now he's usually on timpani. I think he'll be on timpani today. They're sitting talking amongst themselves. They were having a little practice earlier on. They are one of the few features at the bottom of the hill, it has to be said. Looking back towards the chapel of St John's, not many people are on the ceremonial walkway. And something that is noticeable is that there are no rushes on the walkway this year. The idea of the rushes, incidentally, they're collected at the bottom of South Barrule and on Midsummer's Eve carried to the top of South Barrule. This is a tribute to Manannan. The locals used to do this for Manannan, letting us live on this beautiful island and also defending us when necessary by bringing down his cloak, his mist, if enemies arrived. He also had the ability to make one man standing on the top of the hill look like 100 apparently to defend the island. Well, those are where the rushes come from. And today they are not on the ceremonial walkway. Now why that is, I'm not entirely sure, because of course, although the members will go individually up to the hill, they will be leaving it, I think, to go to the captioning ceremony en masse. Let's go back. I think I can go back to Donnan now. I think you have another guest with you, Donnan.
I certainly do. Onchan MHK Rob Callister. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, Donnan.
We saw as a young gentleman just on a roly-poly down the hill, but a relatively blank scene, a bit of a strange one.
Very, very strange. Still proud to represent the people of Onchan and this island on our special celebration, but it is a completely different scene than what we're used to seeing over the last 3 or 4 years.
Have you heard from many constituents who are planning to come down and celebrate here?
No, I've heard from nobody. I think most people are going to be respectful of the restrictions and just listen or watch online, and I think that's the right thing to do today, but hopefully next year we can get back to normality, really.
Has it been a strange year to be a politician? It's been a strange year to be a journalist and a member of the public. How about for you guys?
I think it's been an incredibly strange year. I think nobody could have foreseen when we entered into 2020 what sort of events were going to unfold over the next 3 or 4 months, and it's going to continue until the end of this year and going into 2021 as well. Obviously our focus has to be on the economy, saving jobs, making sure people stay and work, making sure we stay together as a community, and we have done that over the last 3 or 4 months, but we need to continue that now into next year.
You've got responsibility for tourism in the Department for Enterprise, a particularly difficult year for your department so far. Are you planning basically just to work towards next year? Is this tourism season a write-off, do you think?
Well, we're always hopeful that we can do something this year, but it's unlikely. And I think it's more about focusing on 2021, making sure we have an offering, to attract people to the Isle of Man. We have our flagship events such as the TT, but this goes beyond that. We need a very successful 2021-22. We need a lot of events. We need non-weather dependent events, but also our flagship events to be absolutely big draws next year.
We are going to see lots of Manx residents heading off to Guernsey, of course, later this month and next month. What involvement have you had with the government there about opening up that corridor?
I think the teams have done that. A lot of it's come from the Chief Minister himself, where they've invited, we've got a lot of people coming to the Isle of Man. It's really good that we may be able to get some sort of traction from that. I'm not sure it's enough for the entire industry, but we will be welcoming a lot of people from Guernsey to the Isle of Man. We've got a lot of things still to offer. A lot of Manx people, residents, will be going to Guernsey. It's a beautiful little island. It's got a lot to offer. So I think it's the perfect combination for both corridors to open up and for us, and for some people to get some sort of vacation this year.
Just finally looking ahead to next year, what are your priorities? And do you plan to stand again?
I definitely plan to stand in 2021. I love represent the people of Onchan and this island. Focus in the meantime is to get the economy, making sure that people are in jobs, making sure that we get back to some normality, go back to where we were in January this year, where the confidence was high, everybody was quite comfortable, everyone was feeling they had a very positive future. So we need to get into that position as fast as possible.
Gurumaya, thank you very much. Onchan MHK Rob Callister. Speaking of the economy, I have the Treasury Minister Alf Cannon here. Good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Callister and I have just been speaking about economic confidence on the Isle of Man. What kind of state are we in?
Well, I think we're in a good state. I mean, in terms of where we are at the moment, obviously there'll be quite a lot of optimism now that the economy is opening up, particularly the hardest hit sectors, the retail sector, small businesses, leisure and hospitality. Hopefully they'll be feeling a lot more optimistic than they were some weeks ago. But we've got a long way to go in the next few months and over the next year or so, Donald. So we won't really know what the position is, I think, until sort of September, October. We'll obviously see what happens across in the UK. We'll need to understand what's happening globally. You'll recognise, of course, their jobs are starting to go in some sectors. So we'll be trying to deal with that with a new economic plan, which we'll be bringing forward alongside the budget update in July.
Is it damage limitation, realistically?
I think that what we'll be looking to do is trying to protect our core sectors, making sure that we understand our responsibilities as a government where we need to directly support people. I think, for example, if you look at tourism and hospitality, they've clearly been directly impacted by the situation on the borders. And then we're going to have to look more strategically at our industries, such as manufacturing and probably other sectors as well, in terms of what support they will need now moving forward. We've got to protect jobs, and we've also got to look at opportunities as well in terms of potentially retraining and reskilling those who may find themselves out of work.
Are these the sectors that are worst hit?
Well, I think clearly the hospitality and tourism and leisure sector has been incredibly badly hit because of, naturally their business that they would have had during the course of this summer, the fact that we haven't had a TT, we're not going to have a Grand Prix, there was almost little to no chance, I think, of any sort of tourism season happening. So they're clearly going to need some sort of support through the winter months. And of course the other sectors, manufacturing for example, could be impacted by the aerospace industry, and what's happening there broadly more globally around the world. So a lot to think about, and there's going to be a lot of support brought forward, I hope, and measures that we're going to be able to apply to help support these sectors moving forward.
It's a bit of an old adage that the TT, the profits made for some local businesses across that fortnight basically bolster the coffers for the other 50 weeks of the year. Are you able to tell us what extent the cancellation has on the economy? Can you give us any figures?
Well, I think there's always figures being bandied around. The government has produced various reports over the year. Your figures of I think the Minister for Enterprise quoted a figure of £40 million in terms of lost revenue. It does have an impact. I think what we've done to date in terms of the support schemes that we've had in place, the salary support scheme in particular, the access to the funding and the loans that's been available for businesses has done a job. It has stabilised, it has helped these businesses. Clearly the fact that we've got a sort of captured audience at the moment as well, I'm hopeful over the next few weeks that will pay dividends. And I'm also recognising that people are looking at spending in the local economy. I think the Manx public are doing a fantastic job now at the moment supporting local businesses, and I hope that's going to continue over the next few weeks and months.
In terms of ongoing support for businesses, what's in place now to continue to help people in the fallout of this as the real picture becomes clear?
Well, we'll be making a full declaration in terms of our economic plan and alongside the budget update in July. And of course we do have the existing support schemes that are in place at the moment, and of course not only are certain businesses still eligible to access the salary support scheme, but we've also got access to lending schemes as well at the moment as well for businesses. So there is plenty of support around, and clearly we're going to have to look at how we apply that moving forward over the next 6 to 9 months.
Just finally, the picture here looks to be improving. Overseas, it's harder to tell. Do you have one eye on what's happening further afield to try and work out what the picture's going to become in X months' time?
Yeah, I mean, it's always clearly would take a great deal of interest of what's happening globally at the moment. There is, as we say, some knock-on impacts, but not only are these challenges, but they're potential opportunities for the island as well. We're a very strong financial services sector. We have a very strong digital sector at the moment. Manufacturing is quite niche products, and so I think there will also be opportunities for the island. And
will we see some re-specialisation perhaps in the fallout of COVID-19?
Well, I think definitely, almost certainly, some businesses are going to change their business models, change their focus. But look, the island's come through these sorts of challenges before. We've recognised opportunities in amongst that to get through, and I'm again confident in the resilience of the island to make it through what is probably going to be a very challenging 12 months.
Treasury Minister Alf Cannon, thank you for speaking to us. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you. I'll come and speak now to the new Policy and Reform Minister. I think I can still say new, Ray Harmer.
Yes, very
Good
new.
morning,
Good
how are you?
Good morning, very well, very excellent. It's a beautiful morning, beautiful sunny day, and no, it's lovely to be able to celebrate this today.
In your constituency, of course, does it hold a particular special vibe for you, given that this is your territory?
This is just, well, it's our national day. It's just super special. It really is. And when you think of all the things we've been through over the last 3-4 months, it has an extra specialness. And actually just to see people coming around and walking about and at least viewing it.
I spoke to Health and Social Care Minister David Ashford earlier, and we spoke looking back to about 6 or 7 months ago. We heard that there was a very busy legislative programme for government for this year. Lots of that has been shelved, inevitably, because of COVID-19. What work do you have now to try and restore that and get things running again?
It's a massive, massive challenge because, as you've seen in every day in life, stopping things is quite, in one sense, easy, but actually restarting things and getting things in time, because we don't have a huge amount of time in this administration to make sure all of those bills do come through. So we've been working really hard to even in the last 2 or 3 weeks, to really get that back on track. So we're going to have a very, very busy autumn to do that. And if you've noticed recently in some of the keys and Ledger Code, there have been quite a few bills that have sort of, it's been quite a heavy agenda.
So what is on the table at the minute? What's passing through as we speak?
Well, we've got, one of the big things is obviously the Manx Care Bill, which is a massive, huge piece of legislation and really changes the way we deal with the healthcare system. So in essence, separates the operations from the policy and puts it on a much more stronger, better statutory footing. So that's a massive, huge piece of legislation. We've got the landlord registration bill that's coming through. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the education bill as well, but a number.
That's quite divisive, isn't it? The education bill.
It is, but I think there's a number of. I think actually it's possibly more consensus than perhaps first meets the eye in terms of doing a number of those sort of amendments that are desperately needed to the bill. But you've got the companies bill, a number of sort of financial bills, and of course coming out of what we've just done, a civil contingencies bill, so that we have our legislation was 1936, and obviously things have moved on a lot, and we need to move forward.
Coming to the education bill, the teachers' unions complained really that the progress of the bill through the branches of Tynwald and an ongoing review into the education department were perhaps happening in the wrong order. Do you see that point?
Well, what I see is now summer to get that to look at all of that. I think it's a really important opportunity to make sure, and I think there are things that need resolving in the education bill. I don't think it's there, and that needs to be done. And I think having that summer, that time actually gets to get those things resolved and move those forward.
Just finally, some people might have been surprised to see you move out of the infrastructure department into your new role in policy and reform. Can you tell us a bit more about that process? What was the reasons behind it?
Well, I was given that opportunity, and I see myself very much as a team player, and we have some really important national issues at the moment. So, for example, things that have come out of COVID, homelessness, poverty, cold, hunger, all of the legislation, restructuring our whole economy. These are massive issues. In some ways, I felt that I set in a number of things that we needed to do in infrastructure, and those things will be done. So I have every confidence that those will be done by the new infrastructure minister. But I felt that it was important. There's some really important. This is a crisis like no other. And it really is all hands to the pump to really sort of work through the next steps, to use those opportunities that are out there, but also deal with the risks that are out there. And I think I can do more in that role than simply, if you like, turn the last wheel of what we were doing in infrastructure. So I think there's lots of good things in there that need to be finished, but I think it's also important to work as a team and to really make a difference. And as I say, it's team Isle of Man, team Tynwald. We have to come together as an island, and we will, because we'll always come through these things stronger.
Policy and Reform Minister Ray Harmer, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
And we'll move over now, because I think we have Chief Minister Howard Quail. Good morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Really enjoying the day. Glad we're here. Well, we're going to be here anyway, even if we had still had COVID-19 on the Isle of Man, but I think in our wildest dreams when we were planning for this event, we didn't think we would have kicked COVID-19 off the island with our 3 legs. So sadly, we don't have the fair and all the pomp and circumstance that goes with this fantastic ceremony. But we're here, the show must go on, the acts have to be promulgated, and I'm delighted to be here.
A slightly eerie setting with lots of components of what we think of as being the normal Tynwald Day missing this year.
Yes, and it's sad in a way, but at least we're going ahead with it, and we can talk to one another in the close proximity on the Isle of Man. There are other countries in the world where they can't, so we're very, very lucky. And yes, it's sad not to have the guards that either come from the Air Force, Army or Navy. I can't remember whose turn it was this year, and the church service is always nice with the Cleveland Medal singing, but we're here, and the tradition carries on unbroken.
Tell me a bit about the year that's been, because it's been a remarkable year to be Chief Minister of the Isle of Man.
It's been a remarkable 4 years to be Chief Minister of the Isle of Man with all the things we've had to deal with. But yeah, there's always a saying, you get the kitchen sink thrown at you. I think I've had the house thrown at me at the same time on this one. But it's been so busy. I mean, just as we start to ease off a little bit on COVID-19 Brexit, this is a major month for Brexit, and I've been doing lots of behind-the-scenes Teams meetings and Zoom with colleagues in Westminster to discuss ensuring that the Isle of Man isn't forgotten and that our concerns are acknowledged and represented in negotiations, with the European Union, and then you've got WTO negotiations with Canada, Japan, New Zealand and Australia, and all that's going on behind the scenes as well as my day job.
You famously said at one of the government press conferences that the B word had been replaced by the C word. What's next? What's the priority for you now?
Well, it's to drive, I suppose the D word is to drive all our legislation forward. This is the last year of this administration. It tends to be a little bit bitty historically, with some members casting a look over their shoulder for a re-election campaign, but I'm determined that where possible we'll drive as much legislation and good change for the people of the Isle of Man as possible in the last year.
Does that mean that the 5th year of the administration is less productive because people are turning to their constituents again?
Well, historically, but I'm hoping that won't be the case with this administration.
What's the priority now?
I suppose COVID-19 isn't beaten around the world, it's still there, so it's being able to loosen our borders safely so our public can go away to visit loved ones, business trips, etc., and ensure that the Isle of Man doesn't get caught out with Brexit. You know, Protocol 3 served us very well. It was a bolt on it right at the very end, but it served the island very well, and I want to ensure that we're not worse off as a result. So that will keep me sleepless for quite a few nights for the rest of this year.
Later this month, lots of Manx residents will be making the trip over to Guernsey. There's an air corridor has been established. First of all, what kind of role did you play in securing that with the government there?
Well, I remember the public who had a travel agency contacted me a while back and suggested. I thought, yes, that's a really good idea. And because of the British Irish Council, I have good relationships with all the First Ministers and Chief Ministers. So I spoke with Gavin St. Pierre, my equivalent. He doesn't have the title of Chief Minister, he's chairman of a certain committee. But anyway, we had a chat, both agreed it would be a good thing because we're in a very similar position with no cases for well over a month. And we agreed that we would ask our public health team to work together to come up with a safe way to allow it to happen, but to allow our locals to get off and have a bit of a break. We're obviously supporting staycation as much as possible, but I appreciate some people would like to have a bit of a break elsewhere.
It was on the premise that the borders at Guernsey were closed as they are here, or similar sort of restrictions were in place anyway as they are here. We've seen reports on social media that, in fact, there's a trial of travel going between Guernsey and the UK. So is there a feeling perhaps it's not quite what we signed up to?
Well, no, we knew that they were trialling this a while back. What they're doing is you can't go. It's still residents only. You can't just wade into Guernsey from anywhere in the world. It only has to be repatriation or health or compassionate grounds, same as the Isle of Man. But they're trialling a situation where you go on to Guernsey, you quarantine as normal for 7 days, then you're tested on the 7th day, you'll get the results back on day 8, and if you're negative, then you'll be allowed to go around Guernsey, but you won't be able to go into a restaurant, a cinema, theatre, any built-up areas. So they're trialling that, and they reckon they'll catch 80-81% of all cases. So if that works, it may be something that we can try on the Isle of Man.
But this is 250 people per sailing or thereabouts going to pool. Does that dent the confidence of safety for people going to Guernsey, perhaps that's another corridor opening?
Well, it's something we have our corridors coming, and we've now, you can fly in from anywhere in the UK to the Isle of Man, and the boat numbers are increasing significantly too. So we're both taking very similar steps. We have regular talks now that we've agreed this, and as I say, if our public health deem it safe, then I'm more than happy with that. We can't stay like a brigadoon forever, but we don't want to throw away the fantastic position that we're in.
On a personal level, Chief Minister, how has the COVID-19 pandemic been?
It's been, I mean, I thought my previous life couldn't get any busy with Brexit, but I mean, we peaked at over 100-hour weeks for a couple of months, which you can only keep up for so long. I haven't had time to reflect on it, if I'm honest with you. It's been flat out, and I'm sure when I'm no longer Chief Minister, I'll be able to reflect on just what an incredibly interesting time it was. Stressful, traumatic, but proud, really proud of the team around me that stood up and were counted, and the Great Manx public, and for following all the advice and being so good about all this, and that's why we're in this fantastic position.
Are you due a holiday?
My wife says I am, but I don't think I'll be getting one for a while.
Gurmai Morad, thank you very much, Chief Minister. Pleasure to speak to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And you too. Thank you all very much.
Now, I'll hand back up to John Moss, further up towards the hill. People are starting to move onto the hill, John. How's it looking?
It's looking very colourful. The Chief Minister, one question people will be asking themselves, will he be going to be Chief Minister next year? Will he be standing? Well, it'll be interesting to see, because he's had a very tough year indeed. Yes, they are gathering on the hill. The MHKs and the MLCs, the male members, you don't usually see them in top hats and tails. The top hats, as we saw from Mr. Skelly earlier, in danger of being blown off by the breeze when it does blow. But as far as the tails are concerned, you don't expect to see MHKs and tails, so they're tails of the unexpected, if I can put it that way. But as far as the ladies are concerned, we've just been discussing the colours that they're dressed in. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Kerry Sharp in, well, I thought it was moss, but I'm informed that it's probably warm sage is the colour she's wearing. It's a lovely colour indeed. Fuchsia and magenta is the outfit that catches the eye immediately, because that comes from Daphne Kane. And she's wearing ankle boots, leather ankle boots as well, and also a blue fascinator as well. Marlene Masker is dressed in fluorescent yellow. Well, she has a skirt of black and white on, perhaps to recognise her moving to the infrastructure department, where, of course, a lot of their staff have to wear fluorescent colours from time to time. And claret is the outfit colour chosen by a former colleague at Manx Radio, Tanya, and she's there talking to Claire Betterson, who is one of the people actually who recommended her to come to the Claire Barber, my apologies, who recommended her to come into the MLC, to become an MLC first of all. On the top of the hill there is no canopy. Interesting, I've not seen Tynwald Day without a canopy before, but it was decided not to put the canopy up. The Millennium chairs are there. The Millennium chairs, they date from 1979. They were specially made for the Millennium, so they're 40 years old and they're still standing the test of time. Looking behind Tynwald Hill, I can see Manannan looking at me. Now, what's this about? Well, it was quite controversial, because Manannan was made by a couple of sculptors on the island, the Jacksons, and you may have seen them in the past, an enormous Manannan in Sulby Glen and at various places, 35 feet high, with a face and brushwood around it, and it was really spectacular. Now, what they wanted to do, and this was instigated by H.M. the Soul. You may have known H.M. the Soul, well known. He's also known as Ian James Clanton, by the way. But he, amongst other things, was trying to buy Castlemoney. He tells me that he will be going for the South Douglas constituency later on, when a date is named for that. But he is behind putting Manannan behind Tynwald Hill on an area of land. There was controversy about whether they could do it, whether they were allowed to do it. I understand initially they were told, no, you can't do it. Then they said, yes, we can. Well, refer it to the police. The police thought about it, referred it to the Attorney General, but this was over the weekend and the Attorney General's offices were closed, so they weren't able to get a decision on it. So what they've done is lowered the 35-foot Manannan. It is now something like a 15-foot high Manannan. It's a cloth box and the Manannan is on the front of it, etc. But to make sure everything is absolutely safe, they've put barriers around it, 8-foot high barriers 20 feet away from the structure just in case. And it is quite a blowy day today. Something should happen and someone should get injured. We did understand there was to be no public here. And I can tell you there are public here. They're all, well, they need to or not, and they don't at the moment, social distancing, I think, or most of them. They look like they're in little family groups, even on the wall along the front here. But looking across the Fairfield, what used to be the Fairfield before it moved behind me, I can see, about 40, 50 people now who are gathered to watch the ceremony. There's no attempt being made to move them on, perhaps glad to say. They're enjoying the sunshine. It's a breezy day. The wind is coming from behind us from the northeast, and there's a clear sky, a few clouds, and that's all. It really is a gorgeous occasion. This, of course, was left over from the Vikings, this tradition. They left us some Viking DNA, but most substantially they imprinted the idea of this ceremony, the ideas of meeting together in an open place where people could gather to hear what the latest rules were. Also, apparently, they didn't like meeting in closed places, in rooms, because of the danger of someone lurking in the arras with a knife or something. So they used to meet outside, so it was all very open. But the people were obliged to go and listen to what was going on. Because, as I understand it, saying, well, I wasn't there, or I didn't hear it, or I was in bed with a migraine, just didn't wash. You might be for the chop, literally. It is a splendid sight, the hill. Can I just remind you, you can see the pictures of this. It's being streamed live at the moment, both on Manx Radio's website and on the Tynwald site. And I'm looking at the pictures at the moment, and it really is a fabulous sight, despite the fact there are relatively few people there. I see the camera is now honed in. I see Dr. Allenson with his back to us, Mr. Skelly, in conversation there with, is that the Chief Minister? I'm not entirely sure. And at the front here, there's the Laurie Hooper, the Ramsey member, and he's at the moment talking to the Environment Minister, Mr. Boot. They were asked to be there at 15:15. The majority, I think, are now gathered. They're not actually sitting on their seats. They are chatting with each other. We were talking earlier about what a collection of politicians is. I mean, obviously you can have a parliament of owls, so we can't have that one. A chattering of politicians? I'm not sure, because once they get together, there is no end to chattering going on, and that's what they're doing on the hill. They're in small groups, talking amongst themselves, waiting for the governor to arrive, which will be just before 10:30. The video stream is happening. It's beautiful pictures. I'm looking at them at the moment. You can see them on Manx Radio's Facebook. You can see them on the Tynwald site as well. And it really is a chance, if you haven't been able to get here, you feel listening to what we were asked to do, not turn up to the ceremony as far as the public is concerned, that you best stay at home. You can enjoy it by looking at these pictures, and they really are, I must admit, I commend the people who are putting out these pictures, because they really are gorgeous. Today, on the day after the 5th of July, yesterday was a Sunday, therefore impractical for this event, the gathering, as you know, will be different that we usually enjoy. Gone, the crowds, in saying that there is a bit of a crowd here. Gone are the military though, the Guard, the military band. We do have a band over there, Manx Concert Brass. I think I heard one of them tooting his flute over there. I think they're just waiting to strike up the band, because we're going to have a sing-along later on, in not too long. The church service, which usually starts things, won't be starting things. There'll be a short order of prayer built in to this bridge ceremony on the hill. I'm going to be talking, I see the president there is pictured talking. I am doing this commentary for both visual and audio listeners, so occasionally, and you'll have to excuse me, visual listeners, if I sort of describe something that you can plainly see, but that is for the radio audience. We're looking now at the sword bearer, the standard bearer, who will be bringing the sword up the ceremonial way, which, as I said, doesn't have the rushes on this year. It used to be considered good luck. After the ceremony, if you picked up some rushes that had been trodden on, they had to be a bit squashed and trodden on, and then you twisted them into what was called a cross kern and put them above your doorway, and that brought you good luck for the rest of the year. Let me just move out from my position now and see what I can see by moving to the front of the small dais I have here and the small canopy, and moving into the sunshine, which is, it has to be said, very warm, but I'm protected from what breeze there is. Looking across the ceremony where I can see Noel Kringle over there in his watching the ceremony. Of course, Noel Kringle took part in very many of these ceremonies in his time in Tynwald as president as well. Looking up towards the hill, no canopy as I mentioned. All the members are now sitting in their seats. Let me move out of the wind there. They're all seated on their millennium seats. And the officials, and there are only a few of them there, of course. The Clerk of Tynwald is there. The Deemsters will be there to read out the laws. But apart from that, it does look fairly bare, the Four Tiers of Tynwald, which are usually packed. They usually have the guests down on the bottom of the grass, and then they have the members of the commissions and the councils on the other layers. The staves of office will be handed out to the coroners. I don't know if you've seen these staves. They're sort of very light wood. They have a sort of a mock crown on top. And each year the coroners have to arrive here and be given their stave of office to make sure that they continue in office. That is the what has to be done each year. Just looking at the pictures again, we're looking at Kate Lord Brennan, just taking her seat, dressed in white there. We've got a good picture of the president's wig now. He turns now. That's obviously Steve Roden with his long wig, looking from the chapel towards the hill. And the flag, the Union flag, has been prepared. At any moment now, let me see, 25 minutes past 10, we're expecting the governor to arrive, and that is when this shortish ceremony will start. And as I said, we usually have a church service at the beginning of the ceremony. We won't be today, so they'll be progressing, first of all, arriving. There's no people to talk to. Usually the governor stops and has a chat with people who are gathered there. But there are no people gathered there, so he'll be just moving across what used to be the fairground to take the salute at the War Memorial. That's how the ceremony will actually start. And you can see that, as I said, streaming on Manx Radio's website and on the Tynwald website. A picture now of the officials, including the President and the Sword of State, Bernadette McCabe, and there's a picture of the Manx flag, beautifully displayed in this breeze that's blowing across the ground in the sunshine, awaiting the arrival of the governor. So we're looking down towards the left, towards the main road, where the governor's cortege with his police outriders will arrive. And his progress, as I said, will be fairly swift as he moves across the fairground to take his place at the start of this ceremony. No guests from across. The members of Tynwald obviously dressed overall, as I mentioned, top hats, tails, and the ladies very much more colourfully, beautifully colourfully. There really is a picture on the top of this hill. Today is all about promulgation. It isn't a word we use very often. It means spreading word of something by word of mouth or by publishing it. It's an old-fashioned word. You don't hear it very often. I feel it might describe the sort of walk, the gait you have when you walk along the promenade in the face of a stiff breeze. I'm just going to promulgate along the promenade. It's a sort of word that might describe something like that. Here the form of promulgation is by proclaiming it. Originally consisted of the reading of the Act in English and Manx, but after 1865 the reading of the title of the Act and a summary of each section was sufficient. If we were going to read some of these Acts, which go on for about 120 clauses, then I think we would be here for a mighty long time. So they just read the title of it and tell you what it's roughly what it's about. And of course there's a saying that if it's not promulgated, it's not law. It's not strictly true. There have been certain laws that have had to be brought in very quickly. For that reason, they've been taken through Tynwald and have gone through the various stages and been brought into action very quickly, because that would be impractical if they haven't. But generally, laws, and there are 9 of them today, will have to be promulgated here on the hill and then captioned in the chapel. And that'll happen afterwards. What happens? The acts are first of all signed by the President, Tynwald, Steve Roden, and then passed to the Speaker of the House of Keys, Juan Watterson, to add his signature. And you'll be able to see that ceremony as well on this streaming, which is happening, as I say, on Manx Radio's website and also on the Tynwald website. It's on Manx Radio's Facebook, I'm told, a video stream on Manx Radio's Facebook. wonderful. You know, when I first started in radio 40 years ago, we sort of had to wave flags at each other to communicate. These days, you just have to press a button and talk. It's brilliant. But there is quite a crowd here. Obviously, the idea was to have no members of the public, but then, of course, we got rid of social distancing. And everyone said, well, why do we need social distancing at Tynwald? But by then, they'd agreed on what would happen. The guests couldn't arrive because they'd have to come over from the UK and various other places and stay here for 2 weeks, and that would be a bit expensive on the purse. I'm actually putting them up in hotels for 2 weeks and everybody else in the military, etc. But members of the public are here. They're not being moved on. They're standing here watching proceedings, and we've got a sizable crowd here watching proceedings on this delightfully sunny day. I don't want to get too concerned, but the governor should have arrived by now. Is he arriving now? I think he's arriving. He's arriving at the Lich Gate, so I'm going to have to move out to see where he is. Let me see if I can see him. I can't see him as yet. He has arrived, yes, in fact. I'm looking at pictures of him arriving. Sir Richard Gosney has arrived, shakes hands with the president of Tynwald, Steve Roden, and acknowledges the sword bearer, Bernadette McCabe. And the sword bearer turns and moves in a very military fashion ahead of the governor, and they move towards the chapel. Now what will happen is the door of the village gate is opened by the ADC. Now he's been received, and now they're going to process up the path and past the chapel. We're looking at it now, these pictures at the distance across the Fairfield, past the chapel, and they'll be going straight to the War Memorial. This is part of the ceremony which is completely different to usual. Usually they go into the robing room, etc., and there is some time before they emerge into the chapel for a service, but no service this year. They are going straight to the War Memorial as the first part of this ceremony, and a church service of sorts will be held as part of the ceremony on Tynwald Hill. Slow marching behind the ceremonial sword, the governor, Sir Richard Gosney, for whom this is his final year. 5 years he's been extraordinary. May 2016 he was sworn in slightly controversial fashion in the courthouse. I understand now that the idea for future governors is to go back to being sworn in at Castle Rushen, as that's more historically pleasing. So this is his final year. I don't think there are any plans to extend his tenure of the office. So come next year, presumably, we shall have another governor, a new name on the list of governors of the Isle of Man. The procession is now moving down the ceremonial way. I can see the Deemsters there in their wonderful outfits, long wigs of course. You can hear in the background the sound of the feet of the crunching on the gravel of the walkway as they move towards the entrance to the War Memorial, where they will turn and a wreath will be laid on the War Memorial by the governor. One or two people there just by the side of the ceremonial way taking pictures as the governor goes past. Beautiful conditions, absolutely. It's warm when you get out of the slight breeze. The flags are fluttering, grass is green, all's right with life. Well, putting aside the problems we've had in the last 2 to 3 months, of course. The governor turns just to check with his ADC and then moves through the entrance to the War Memorial. And there's a young naval cadet there holding the wreath that will be laid on the War Memorial. The governor has a quick word with him, then stops in front of the War Memorial. There's a pause. A pause over the Fairfield as well. The governor moves forward to the naval cadet, who salutes him. The governor takes the wreath, moves through the small iron gate to the steps of the War Memorial, lays the wreath, bows, turns, he's wearing the Bolland Bane, and steps away. The flags dipping during playing of the last post. Now a minute's silence. Now the governor turns from the war memorial and joins members of the procession that will take its way to the hill, including the beautiful robes of the president of Tynwald, designed originally for Sir Charles Carouche, the robes of the bishop, the robes of the Speaker of the House of Keith, the first Deemster there in his colourful crimson robes and long wig, and also the clerk of Tynwald there. The governor. You can probably hear his feet crunching on the gravel. Resumes his place in the procession behind the sword of state. The Manx flag is now brought into the procession, fourth place behind the governor's ADC. And now Bernadette McCabe marches up the centre of the ceremonial way. Compared to other years, of course, only a few members in this procession. About 10 in total, as opposed to, well, many people, including the guests, in previous years. My commentary is rather sotto voce at the moment because they are moving. It's very quiet. Everybody is very quiet around. There's not the usual sound from the fair behind, and there's not usual sound from the many people in the crowd. And so my voice might well carry rather across to the ceremonial way. So I'm speaking fairly quietly now, as they are now directly opposite us in our small gazebo, which occasionally you can hear the sides flapping in the breeze. It is a cooling breeze. There's the bishop in his crozier, not wearing a mitre today. There's the first Deemster, Andrew Corlett, glancing towards us. And there's the clerk of Tynwald behind him, and that's the entire cortege. In fact, nine making up this cortege as opposed to the dozens who usually do. Bernadette McCabe and the sword have arrived at the bottom steps of the hill. She mounts up the first set of steps and now is tackling the second set of steps with the governor just behind her and the governor's ADC. The president now mounts the hill, followed by the speaker, the bishop, the first deemster and the clerk. All the members, of course, on the hill of the legislature, of the Legislative Council and of the House of Keys standing now, waiting the arrival of the president. The governor turns his head to one side, turns his head to the other, nods to the speaker and the president. The sword is put down. Orchestral brass providing the royal anthem. Now the fencing.
Sit down, Osman.
Originally, if you disobeyed the fencing and misbehaved on this occasion, you could be hung, drawn and quartered, incidentally. Don't think that penalty still applies. As you can see from the pictures on the Manx Radio Facebook page, no canopy.
Learned First Deemster, direct the court to be fenced.
The voice of the governor.
Coroner of Glenfaber Sheeding and in Lyder, fence the court.
Andrew Corlett, the First Deemster.
I do fence this court of Tynwald in the name of our most gracious sovereign lady the Queen. I do charge that no person do quarrel, brawl or make any disturbance, and that all persons do answer the names when called. I charge its audience to witness this court is fenced. I charge this audience to witness this court is fenced. I charge this whole audience to bear witness this court is now fenced.
These short
church service. Quail show for Hera on Zenem Charn Vanning. Nach Gin Pergebi, Troje, Bagert, the Gin Bornes to be, as the Gin de Hulje Ferg, Freger, Trevis Nain. Tamicora Cortus Nain is shaw, the Vel and Quail show for Hera. Tamicora Cortus Nain is shaw, the Vel and Quail show for Hera. Tamicora Cortus Clednain is shaw, the Vel and Quail show, Nishjach for Hera.
Bob Carswell and Lerda. Now the bishop.
Call upon the Lord Bishop to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, Father of us all, we thank you for the beauty of our land and for the rich heritage of this nation. Inspire the people of this island with the spirit of righteousness and love, willing both to share and to receive, that in prosperity and in adversity we may declare that we are one with each other and one with you, through our Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ. Amen. Baniach ye olieniach linerimach a spirit no diranimas just a hantin meru es on die brech. Amen.
The Bishop leaning forward slightly to the microphone to deliver that. The First Deemster now.
Incoming coroners, take the oath in ancient form to execute your offices for the ensuing year and receive your staves of office from the hands of His Excellency.
The coroners now are centre stage. The staves indeed are staves. They've got a mock crown on their heads, and they get handed to the coroners to mark their year of office ahead. The four move up the hill. One lady coroner. It's a bit crowded at the top there. They go down on 2 knees when they can. As I say, there's not a lot of room.
By that book, and by the holy contents thereof, and by the wonderful works that God hath miraculously wrought in heaven above, and in the earth beneath, in 6 days and 7 nights, you shall, without respect of favour or friendship, love or gain, consanguinity or affinity, envy or malice, well and truly execute the office of coroner for each sheading to which you have been appointed for the ensuing year. So help you God.
Consanguinity is a word you don't hear very often. It basically means that you don't give anyone favour because they happen to be related to you, which I suppose in a small island could be a danger. The coroners have now been, or are being handed by the governor, Sir Richard Gosney, and this his last Tynwald, their staves of office. They are kneeling where they can because it's rather crowded at the top. And now they rise to their feet and turn. All, of course, wearing the Bollen Bane, holding their staves in their right hand, and move down the hill to resume their places. They turn, bow to the top of the hill, 2 go left and 2 go right. Now, the promulgation.
Deemster, I exhort you to proclaim to the people in ancient form such laws as have been enacted during the past year and which have received the royal assent.
Highways Amendment Act 2019, an act to amend the Tynwald procedure in respect of certain orders amending the definitive maps for rights of way and associated statements, to amend the definition of planning approval for the purposes of the Highways Act 1986 and for connected purposes.
Sladders Region Moora Liazige Feed Giedes Nijeg. Sladders de Liazige Acht over Tynwald benten de ordig nenjag. De Liazige Kurten Chire Goil na Cadon en Teach is im Rijn benten douw. De Liazige en Bont Kied Planel benten de Sladders Region Moora Nijgied Jeg Keer Feed Shea. As son Cushinelia benten de so.
Dormant Assets Act 2019, an act to provide for the establishment of a fund into which the balances of certain dormant assets may be transferred, and for the distribution of money in that fund for charitable and other purposes, subject to a right to reclaim those balances from the fund and for connected purposes.
Sladders Kuja Gedoil Tregit Feed Giedes Nijeg. Sladders de Kareels on Korer Bon Store Urgid. Hugge, aldus vele vreed herrisch en urgid maren was Kuj Urgidoil en jacht te tregit. As on Kor machen urgid onze storsjen, ra hai kushen giastelachas kushenelle. Conent, de wel care force on, de gedden rischen urgid sjen was a store. As on kushenelle benten de so.
Charities Registration and Regulation Act 2019, an act to repeal and replace the Charities Registration Act 1989, to make further provision for the registration and regulation of charities and for connected purposes.
Sladders recorders as Gorneel Kirp Jastelach, feed gides naijeg. Sladders de moege as goilinid, sladders recorse kirbiastelach, naichie jeg kerfides nai. Te kereil na saage mechon recortes as gorniel kirbiastelach, as on cushinelia benten de saw.
Council of Ministers Amendment Act 2019, an act to uphold and support the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary on the island and for connected purposes.
Sladders kunsel na shirveshi, liazige, feed gides naijeg. Sladders de kommelsoes as njartige, rele lai as sersus na breunen ernelion, as on cushinelia benten de saw.
Income Tax Legislation Amendment Act 2019, an act to confirm certain temporary taxation orders, to amend the Income Tax Act 1970 and for connected purposes.
Sladders laichen kiestjits jaag, liazige, feed gides naijeg. Sladders de shigerige pert, de orderen kies tameltag. De liazige sladders chits jaag, naichie jeg 3 feeders jai, as on cushinelia benten de saw.
Town and Country Planning Amendment Act 2019, an act to amend the Town and Country Planning Act 1999 to make provision for national policy directives, to clarify the matters for which provision may be made in a development procedure order and the circumstances in which an application for planning approval may be referred to the Council of Ministers, to provide for a community infrastructure levy and the constitution of the Planning Committee, and for connected purposes.
Sladders gonjeel troggle ons Belgian is a cheer, liazige, feed gides naijeg. Sladders de liazige, sladders gonjeel troggle ons Belgian is a cheer, naichie jeg, ker feedes naijeg, as de kereils on serigen policy a schoenach. De ginu na spachtel na cushion son others kereil ve gint ons oorlach ach ovri troggle, as lied na oren others cor achens on kid planel de ve currit gus kunsel shirveshi. De kereils on kish bon troggles in a doil as acht rail of ving planel, as on cushionelia bent in the saw.
Tynwald Proceedings Amendment Act 2020, an act to amend the Tynwald Proceedings Act 1876 to make provision about compulsion to give evidence, produce documents, or supply information relating to proceedings in Tynwald and about the competence of witnesses in respect of those matters, and for connected purposes.
Sladders imiachten Tynwald, liazige, feed gides feed. Sladders de liazige sladders imiachten Tynwald, hoch je jeg 3 feedes shejeg. De gereil mechoon eignige cor fenish, dokmuden na fishery, benten de imiachten ons Tynwald, as mechoon fondit fenishi benten de na cushionshen, as on cushinelia benten de saw.
Public Sector Pensions Amendment Act 2020, an act to amend the Public Sector Pensions Act 2011 to remove the requirement to obtain consent for the making of certain schemes, to extend the definition of schemes and provide for the amendment of existing schemes, and for connected purposes.
Sladders pensionen a geroteach, liazige, feed gides feed. Sladders de liazige sladders pensionen a geroteach, feed gides nanjeg. De voege en fame toons on gedden ked de junus schemen enjach. De China maken bond her schemen, is kereils on liazige schemen toon hanna. As on cushinelia benten de saw.
Emergency Powers Amendment Act 2020, an act to amend the Emergency Powers Act 1936 so as to amend the procedure for emergency regulations, confer jurisdiction on courts of summary jurisdiction generally over offences under the Act, to provide for the imposition of fixed penalties, for the temporary continuation of emergency regulations at the end of a state of emergency, and to make provision postponing local elections until 2021, and for connected purposes.
Sladders poerigen ons trein gauach, liazige, feed gides feed. Sladders te liazige sladders poerigen er lie, naichie jeg, she jeges feed, de Liazige nach Davrisch son Reilen Trein Gauach. De Corpoor de Quailen Brunes Jair de Gelalrisch Lochten von Claddus. De Gereil son Immid Kerrichen Site. Son Frail vooruit de Hamiltach, Reilen Trein Gauach eg Jerris Steed Tre Gauach. Uit de Gereil son Ligas Ja, Ryerson in a Doyle, der a feed heed, Dennis feed. As son Cushinelle Bentendis all.
The promulgation of the laws. Now, petitions for redress.
Has Your Excellency any further commands?
If there are any petitions, let them now be brought forward.
Now, they had to be submitted beforehand. They're not allowed to be brought to the base of the hill. There are 13 of them, and the Clerk of Tynwald presents those 13 to His Excellency. The Governor suggesting to be seated now for a moment.
With the petitions, I shall refer these petitions to the Standing Orders Committee of Tynwald, who will report thereon at their earliest convenience. This concludes the proceeding on Tynwald Hill. There will now be a sitting of Tynwald Court in the Royal Chapel, with the learned First Deemster and others here assembled. I am pleased to accept the invitation of the President of Tynwald to be present at the sitting of Tynwald Court and to witness the captioning of these acts just promulgated.
Roger Phillips, the clerk, steps down from the hill to the podium. The Governor stands. The Sword of State is now processed in front of him. The job of the clerk is basically to tell the procession.
His Excellency, the Lieutenant Governor.
The order of procession of the hill.
Private Secretary to the Lieutenant Governor.
Because this is an unusual year. The Sword of State and Gabe now on the final set of steps, and you'll hear her feet crunching
the Manx
on the
flag.
gravel in a moment.
The President of Tynwald. The First Deemster and Clerk of the Rolls.
It's a wonderful sight, this in the sunshine and the breeze. You can see it, obviously.
The Lord Bishop.
Manx Radio's Facebook page and on the Tynwald site.
Her Majesty's Attorney General.
Sir Richard Gosney, his final year as Governor, his ADC and the Manx flag.
Members of Legislative Council, Mr.
first
Henderson
quartet
and
in the
Mrs.
procession.
Poole Wilson.
Then in his silver and blue robes, the President of Tynwald, the robes originally designed for Sir Charles Carouche when he
Mrs.
took
Lord
on the role
Brennan
of President.
and Miss August Hanson.
The First Deemster in his black and scarlet robes and long wig, Andrew Corlett.
Mrs. Masker and Mrs. Sharp.
And white cuffs. The Bishop, without a mitre, but holding
Mr.
his
Greenhill
crozier,
and Mr. Mercer.
in his scarlet, black and white robes.
The Clerk of the Legislative Council.
As is tradition,
In
the
Leicester.
legislature move off the hill first.
Members of the House of Keys, the Speaker of the House of Keys.
Members of the Keys and
the Chief Minister.
The legislature putting their top hats on as they leave the hill.
Ms Edge and Mr Hooper. Mr Callister and Dr Allinson.
Speaker Joe Watterson moving off the hill. Now the Chief Minister puts his topper on.
Mrs Kane and
moves
Mr
down
Boot.
the ceremonial way. If you're looking at
Mr
this
Perkins and Mr Harmer.
visually, then there is a smashing scene from the chapel looking back down the ceremonial way.
Mr Peake and Mr Robertshaw.
As this procession takes form and takes shape.
Mr Ashford and Mrs Barber.
Daphne Kane now leaving the hill in, I should think, probably the most
Mrs Corlett
spectacular
and Mr Baker.
outfit of the day. Now there's something...
Mr Thomas and Mr Cannon.
Yes, I'll tell you what that was. That was cheers for the Chief Minister. Well done, Howard.
Mr Crageen
As he
and
passed
Mr
by
Morehouse.
The crowd, and there is a crowd here, quite a substantial crowd considering we're not supposed to have one, applauding the Chief Minister as he
Mr
passed
Shimmins
by.
and Mr Skelly.
And he removed his top hat, and he has now, and is acknowledging the crowd. You can hear more applause for Mr Ashford as he moves past with Claire Barber, Ashford the Health Minister.
The coroners.
Who, with the Chief Minister, has borne much of the brunt of the COVID crisis. The Treasury Minister and former Council Minister, remember Chris Thomas, now moving down the ceremonial way. Mr. Cannon also gets some applause. Then other members of the House of Keys. If you're looking at the pictures, what you're looking at now is the Chapel of St John's, where the gathering is taking place for the captioning of the Acts. The Bishop has just arrived, the President is there, he'll be the first to sign the Acts. They'll then be passed to the Speaker of the Keys. Kate Lord Brennan has arrived in her white outfit today. And the Speaker of the Keys, Joan Watterson, is now moving down the centre of the church. The ceremonial procession is now halfway down the ceremonial way. This, of course, is taking place a lot quicker than it does normally because there are so many fewer people than there are on normal occasions. I'm glad to say that we're staying with you to give you commentary on what is happening inside the chapel, the captioning ceremony. That won't take place for a few minutes yet, obviously, as the members of the Keys and the Legislative Council move into the chapel. I can speak a little louder now because the ceremonial way is empty. But now we're looking at these beautiful pictures you can see on Manx Radio's Facebook page and also on the Tynwald website of this ceremony taking place, which is really the crossing the final T and dotting the I on the Acts, which was signed initially by the President of Tynwald, Mr Roden, and then passed to the Speaker of the Keys, Joan Watterson. After the bright sunshine outside, it is quite sombre and dark inside the Chapel of St John's. The President standing, waiting for the arrival of the other members. The hill now deserted apart from the Millennium chairs. A bit more cloud than there was earlier, but it has been a smashing morning for this ceremony. The Sword of State is now borne into the chapel. In the final part of this procession. As you can see from the pictures, it's laying in front of the President for this ceremony of captioning. The President bows his head and McCabe marches away smartly. We're now ready for the captioning.
I have invited His Excellency the Lieutenant Governor and His Honour the Deputy Governor, First Deemster and Clerk of the Rolls to witness this sitting of the Court. Mr. Speaker and I will now caption the acts just promulgated on Tynwald Hill. Please be seated.
The Speaker dips his quill, it's a feather quill, in the ink pot, preparing to do his part in this. The President signs the first of the acts. Roger Phillips, the clerk, is on hand with a blotter to carefully blot the signature. There we go. And the paper with the act is borne across the chapel to where the Speaker will now sign it with his feather quill. I don't suppose the Speaker uses a feather quill on any other occasion apart from this. He may do. It may be his weapon of choice when writing letters at home. I don't know. 9 acts to be captioned. Here's the second one on its way. Again, another act is placed before the President and is blotted and then passed to the Deputy Clerk, who moves across to the Speaker, who duly signs it, and it is blotted. And folded and borne away to wherever acts that are promulgated go. I'm not entirely sure. Probably inside one of those red cases initially. How many acts have we? You know, I've lost count. I think we're on 4 or 5. Are we on the 4th act? I think we're on the 5th act now, so there's only 4 to go after this. This entire ceremony, of course, because it's in abridged form, has gone very quickly indeed. Goodness me, look at the time now. 5 minutes past 11, and we're in the closing stages, it has to be said. It's gloomy inside. It's getting a little less bright outside as well. There's some cloud cover coming across in the west, but I don't think bearing any threat of the showers that we were promised at the moment anyway. Another act is placed in front of Mr. Roden. And blotted. And borne away. I think we're arriving at the end of the captioning. There must be a couple more to do, I think. Are you enjoying, I hope, this piece of ceremonial and theatre on your screens if you're watching this on Manx Radio's Facebook page or indeed on the Tynwald website? It is fascinating. I don't usually get to see this because I don't move from my point to the captioning, but on this occasion I am actually able to enjoy it along with the rest of you, viewers. And listeners, I'm sorry you were unable to see this, but it is interesting to view it. A dip of the quill into the ink by the Speaker as he waits for, I think this is probably the final act. we go. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Blot, blot, blot. And the deeds, not the deeds, but the acts are done. Mr. President putting his white gloves back on again. The clerk moves the microphone towards him to conclude this session of Tynwald.
Members of the Council, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Keys, that concludes the business of the court. Tynwald Court will now stand adjourned to Tuesday, 21st of July 2020 at 10:30 a.m. in Douglas. I now call upon honourable members to stand for the departure of His Excellency and the First Deemster.
And so they shall depart, and they've had a lovely day for this ceremony. Can I just tell you that the 21st of July is going to be a budget Tynwald, as we've heard the Treasury Minister saying, obviously with the happenings of the last few months, a budget is needed, and a budget will be produced on the 21st of July. It'll be virtually the same as the budgets that are held earlier on in the year, with a lot of detail coming out, a lot of detail necessary to get the island back on even keel. We're watching the ADC turn and bow to the President as she follows Richard Gosney on This Is Final. Tynwald Open Day, Tynwald Open Day ceremony. He's been here 5 years now, signed in on May 2016. And he will be replaced next year by...
Thank you, honourable members. We
the
will
next
now
governor.
Assemble outside for the departure of His Excellency.
Voice of Steve Roden, the President. So that's it, I suppose. The ceremony on the hill, the march down the walkway into the chapel for some captioning. All done fairly quickly and very precisely. We had thought that there might be an occasion for one or two people to make certain, well, unhappiness is felt, but this hasn't happened. Nothing has been done to disturb the equilibrium of this abridged version of Tynwald, which has been carried out in beautiful sunny weather with a light breeze. So for my part, thank you very much for watching and for listening, and let me return you now to the studios on Douglas Head.
Congratulations on perhaps the most unique Tynwald in 1,000 years. Yeah. Lockdown Don't worry, over a few weeks it came into the club.
I will take a photograph.
Make sure I wear the knickerbockers, it's much easier.
It's one night. Big jumps, folks.
Thanks, Dave. It's at this point in the wedding I normally say a big cheer for the right group. I think we are...
Well, Your Excellency, here we are standing in the magnificent grounds of Government House. It's been a 6 months of uncertainty, of turbulence, of tragedy, and of course of togetherness. What are your overriding thoughts as we are here today?
Yes, it has been a horrifying 6 months for a number of people who got ill and got very ill, and others whose relatives died. The island has pulled together, the community has shown its spirit. The Isle of Man has done it its own way and has been, fingers crossed, done well. I say fingers crossed for the next stage as well. But in the first phase of this crisis, of this coronavirus, the Isle of Man has come through this phase much faster than the UK. And I think they will go on showing that they will take their own decisions and carry the community with them as far as they possibly can.
To me, and I'm sure to a degree you and Lady Gosney feel the same, it seems 5 minutes ago since you arrived on the island, yet here we are, and this will be the fifth and final Tynwald Day you'll be presiding over as Lieutenant Governor. Hard to imagine, really, isn't it?
Well, yes, that is quite difficult. In 4 years, a place comes very much home. But it is quite right that the Queen's representative should change every 5 years or so. We will live with a lot of regrets. We feel very comfortable, very much at home here, but quite accept that right from the start there has been a time on this, and the bell will ring next year.
You've embraced community life and really got involved in the breadth and depth of so many facets of island life. Have you a particular highlight? You are allowed more than one, incidentally.
We've enjoyed all the main events of the year. TT gets getting used to, but the more you watch it, the more interesting it becomes. And the more you get to know a bit about the riders, you meet some of the riders, you get to know some of the marshals, and then the MGP Classic TT is a bit different, especially the MGP at the end of the summer, and that's good. But I've enjoyed some of the smaller things, small countries financial management. It's a long-winded way of saying bringing in the public accountants from around the world, which the Isle of Man does very well in June every year. And that is showcasing the Isle of Man to people who haven't really thought about the Isle of Man, and then they come here and they see the way the Isle of Man, in this case, conducts its public accounts, makes accountability the order of the day, and woe betide any public servant who even spends sixpence halfpenny on something he shouldn't, because it'll be shown up.
It may not be quite the spectacle that we are used to, but we have got a Tynwald Day to enjoy, and certainly that's surely going to lift the spirits when you think of everything we've been through over the last 6 months. Do you believe that will be something islanders, but also people from off the island looking in with island connections will reflect on and perhaps appreciate even more than normal this year?
Well, that's for them to say for themselves. I imagine they will, but I wouldn't be presumptuous for me to put words into their mouths, and I wouldn't want to do that. But it is something that has gone on for over 1,000 years. We've seen what a very special event Tynwald Day is. Let's not be over-ambitious. If I say let's hope that it goes on for another 1,000 years, that's slightly far-reaching. But I think people here have a certain confidence, and certainly I have a confidence, that it will go on for as many hundreds of years more as the island chooses to run it, and the sentiment at the moment is that it will and it should.
You were clearly very proud to be involved today on our Manx National Day, and as the Her Majesty's representative for the Manx Nation, what is your message finally to the Manx Nation?
I think if the Isle of Man Manx Nation goes on showing the sense of community and sense of taking care of each other, looking out sideways, neighbours, people in the village, people along the road in the towns, the way they have during the last 6 months, I think the island will be very well served.
Thank you very much, and have both you and Lady Gosney a super day.
Thank you very much.
Well, Mr. President, here we are again, Tynwald Day, another Tynwald Day upon us. Perhaps, I suppose, not that long ago, there was a thought that we wouldn't even be at the situation where we were able to celebrate Tynwald Day in person this year.
Tynwald Day itself, of course, come what may, will always go ahead because it has the important constitutional function of promulgating and captioning the acts of Tynwald. But yes, normally it's, as our National Day, a very important day out for many, many families in the island, centred in St. John's with all the activities going on there. But the constitutional function has been preserved, and we've been able to do this by considerably modifying the arrangements for the day.
July 1995 was your very first sitting as the member for Garth, and here you are now a quarter of a century on as Tynwald president, no less. What are your overwhelming feelings and indeed what memories does this day evoke for you?
Well, Tynwald Day, of course, is very important because it is the occasion when the island community proclaims to the world that we are a self-governing nation. You never forget the first occasion when you process up the hill, and 25 years later, in my case, it will be an equally proud moment.
What do you believe July the 5th means to onlookers around the world?
To those Manx people who over couple of hundred years have dispersed throughout the world, it remains a very important day. There's considerable interest, and of course through the magic of online communication, our event will be transmitted worldwide anyway, thanks to your good self and your colleagues in the media, and it will be followed with great interest and with great pride.
This year, after everything, do you expect there will be perhaps that bit more reflection than normal?
Yes, there's an old saying, be thankful we're as well as we are, and we in the Isle of Man must be truly thankful for many things. Most recent, of course, having, despite the tragic deaths involved, the worst of the coronavirus that might have been, and to that tribute must be paid to those in authority and public servants who have worked tirelessly during the 3 months of the immediate emergency to keep the people of the island safe. We'll be ensuring the centuries-old right of petition on Tynwald Day by anyone still takes place in a different manner, but the principle will be there by submitting in advance of Tynwald Day petitions, which will be presented on the petitioner's behalf by the Clerk of Tynwald to the Lieutenant Governor. So all these old features, it's a happy blend of the ancient and the modern that we have in practice in the Isle of Man.
Well, all that remains to be said is have a super Tynwald Day.
I'm sure we all will. The Manx people in the main will be celebrating Tynwald Day in their own way at home, but the day will go ahead in centuries-old traditional form.
Mr. President, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, Tynwald Day 2020, Mr. Speaker, Duran Watterson, what does today mean to you?
I suppose as a Manxman, there is no more important day than Tynwald Day in the Manx calendar, really. To think that you have this sense of place, the sense of belonging to an island generally is something pretty remarkable in the days when we've got the internet, we have people jetting off all over the world, the fact that we don't stay so close to home, to feel such a strong connection to a place in our island, and to know that generations before of your family will have gone to the hill to have seen this and to have taken part in a ceremony such as that over 1,000 years is something that's quite remarkable.
You mentioned family there. I mean, what are your earliest recollections? What are your earliest memories of this day?
Oh, as a child going along with parents, as a scout lining the route, opening the governor's car door one year as a scout was one of the first involvements in Tynwald Day, and then jumping straight from that, I suppose, being an interested bystander, to being a member all of a sudden. And that moment when you step out of the Royal Chapel, look down the processional way, you can see the crowd, you see the hill, the Manx flag flying on top of that, and that's a very, very special moment to treasure.
Traditions, heritage, culture, it is all part of the day. How important, and I realise there are restrictions this year, of course, but how important is that mix?
It's really important, because without the public there is no Tynwald Day, really, and it's so gratifying to know that the public will be able to come. We were really worried about what is Tynwald Day really going to mean without a public to proclaim the acts too. The fair, the attractions, the coming together, the seeing people that you won't have met since last Tynwald Day, it's nice that we can still have an element of that still as part of the ceremony, despite the difficulties we've had.
What specific roles do you carry out, will you be carrying out today?
Well, yes, I suppose in a far more pared down sense, on Tynwald Day this year, it'll be very much still being part of the procession up to the hill, being part of the wreath laying ceremony, which actually is something we don't normally get to play a part in, so that will be an innovation. Normally the President and myself and the members of the House are in the robing room ready to go when the Governor's laying his wreath, so that's a part of the ceremony that will be a bit different.
How important is Tynwald Day in terms of improving relations and enhancing and showing the island as a well-regulated, responsible jurisdiction on the world stage?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's part of that winning friends, influencing people, and building on your reputation, really. So yes, it is a good opportunity to engage with politicians from neighbouring jurisdictions to showcase what we're about, not just on the day itself, but in the days leading up and the days following, for them to see more of Manx society, to learn more about what we do, to dispel, as in some cases, some of the myths of the Isle of Man, but also for them to be a part of this wider story and to feel a place that has a great sense of belonging, a great sense of history, but not just looking backwards, but looking forwards with such optimism as well.
Mr. Speaker, Joe Motterson, thank you for your time. Happy Tynwald Day.
Good night, James.
Well, Chief Minister, it's been a year few will forget, and of course we're only just halfway through in truth. Here we are though, Tynwald Day upon us here again. What are your immediate thoughts as we are sitting here?
Well, I think maybe it's a time for us as a nation to reflect on the fact that we do live in a fantastic country. You know, we are blessed to live on the Isle of Man, and I think an awful lot of us take it for granted, and I think it's something like COVID-19 that makes us realise we spend more time maybe at home with our loved ones, we look at the beautiful countryside, we listen to the birds, the dawn chorus, and the community spirit is so much better. People have really stepped up and looked after neighbours who maybe needed that little bit of extra help with shopping and support. And I think this year is a special year for us all to reflect on what's gone by. We've lost 24 people on the Isle of Man, but what a fantastic way our community has come together, and I would hope that people will really celebrate Tynwald Day, and maybe we've taken it for granted, but it is our national day, so let's celebrate it.
As a Manxman, can you put into words those feelings of pride, not only taking part in the special ceremony, but effectively leading the troops?
Yes, well, if you haven't already guessed, I'm incredibly proud to be a Manxman and very proud of this island, and I wouldn't put my life on hold for 10 years if I didn't passionately care about the island. It is a gem of God's earth, and to be the Chief Minister of it is no higher honour. I'm representing my home, my country, and doing my best for everyone.
I know you have over a year to go in your tenure, but as it stands at the moment in time, and you say this is a chance for reflection, a rare chance to pause for reflection, what do you think will be the defining historical event of your time in office? Brexit or coronavirus? It's a bit of a double bubble, really, isn't it?
Well, there's a multiple bubble, James, for want of an analogy. There's an awful lot that I have to deal with behind the scenes that would have, if we hadn't have fixed or dealt with satisfactorily, would have significantly damaged our economy. So beneficial ownership was a clear one where we could have had the UK Parliament legislating for us, which would have been an absolute no-no. Tax-free, money val, EU Code of Conduct Group, the list goes on of all the things. I think, you know, sometimes you say that you've had everything bar the kitchen sink thrown at you. I think we've had the house thrown at us on the island, because we all thought Brexit would be this sort of unprecedented thing that in a generation no chief minister in Tynwald would have to deal with. And it's amazing that all of a sudden Brexit has been not been the biggest topic. COVID-19 has, but we as a nation have been very successful despite all that's gone on around us.
And just finally, amidst all the evolution, there's tradition, there's heritage, there's culture. In many ways this year is going to be Tynwald light, but the foundation of it will remain the same. So what are you looking forward to the most?
I think that the whole thing, it's a bit of history. You as Chief Minister walking up the hill, leading your colleagues behind you, sitting on the hill as a Manxman, thinking of all the people that have come before you, just your place in history maybe. And I make no bones about it. I am an incredibly passionate and proud Manxman, and therefore to be Chief Minister it's an incredible honour, and I will miss it when I'm no longer in this position, but I will have many happy memories.
Chief Minister, thank you very much for your time. Have a super Tynwald day.
Thank you very much, James.